Junkie Nation, Gorgeous George and Goes delivering for you all again. We got former PFL light heavyweight champ and current PFL play-by-play commentator Sean O'Connell, Real OC Sports. What up?
What up? It's a great pleasure to speak to you gentlemen again. How are you?
We're doing great, thank you. And before we get into some MMA, because PFL is about to kick off, you can talk about any sport. Let's just talk a little bit about March Madness, man. Is your bracket in any way alive, or has it just been a disaster like mine?
So I thought I was just going to be in like complete shambles after that opening weekend because I had Ohio State playing in the national championship game against Gonzaga, right? But it turns out only that region really got too messed up for me because I work for the Pac-12 network on SiriusXM. Of course, my bracket reflected a lot of Pac-12 bias, and that served me very, very well because the Pac-12 has 3 Elite Eight teams.
And that's only because last night one of them had to eliminate the other.
That's right. And like we could get into that all day. As you guys know, I live in Utah, and the reason that happened is because of BYU and BYU not playing on Sundays, so they had to shuffle everything around. So Pac-12 is big mad about that, and they probably have a right to be.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have expected anything less. I'm still going to call it, even though we're in 2021, it's still the 2020 effect. I think things will be back to normal next year when sports seem to settle down and we get back in our real seasons and the real days of which March Madness is played. I guess they gave a couple days to highlight March Madness. Do you watch that at all?
I watched a little bit because, again, the Pac-12 had a couple guys that were wrestling for national championships, and I watched a little bit of the NCAA tournament. There's a lot going on. I didn't watch any of the WWE wrestling. I haven't watched a lot of NBA yet this year, but MMA, man, I've been trying to like brush up. I'm rusty on my play-by-play, so I've been watching UFC fights and stuff, trying to make sure that mute that and commentate over top just to make sure that I'm not too rusty.
Hey, let's get going on that then. I want to ask you a question, and again, we'll get to PFL, I promise. How do you feel like your style is compared to, we'll say, Mauro Ranallo from former Strikeforce and Bellator, and I guess he's done it all. But Chevello, he's currently with one championship. John Anik has really grown to be, included with the greats as well. He's put in some work. What have you ever tried to take maybe just a little bit of what they do, or have you really carved out your own style? What's been your approach to this?
I mean, I'm trying to carve out my own style, but I'm still relatively new at it. And I think a lot of my influences come from the bat and ball sports, not just the combat sports, right? Like guys like Mike Tirico, who's great at calling every single sport. I try and take a little bit of that. I definitely do admire all those names that you mentioned. I think those guys do an incredible job. Like Ranallo and Chevello, I feel like they kind of have their little catchphrases that they're known for. And that, while that's more of a trait of old school broadcasting, I like it. So I should probably start coming up with something like that for myself. But, man, I'm just fleshing it out. I'm still in the feel-out process. A lot of those guys have been doing it for 2+ decades, and I'm only heading into my 3rd season. So hopefully within a very short time, people will talk about me in the same light that they talk about those, consummate pros.
Well, I think you can definitely get into that foursome for sure. And I think one thing that'll benefit you is the time you spent in these cages. You fought, and I think that perspective will be interesting. But so far, I mean, I've really loved what the PFL has done. They've tried to different formats. Remember when you guys went 4 men deep when you had you, Moss, and Randy and Eve, and then you guys went back to 3. This year you're adding Ken Flo, so you're going to have you, Randy, and Kenny Florian. But have you settled into what you like? Is the 3-man booth what you prefer? I mean, I guess that might be a tough question because that's kind of the hand you're dealt. But was there something to 4-man, and is there something to when it's just been two of you. I think you got dealt that hand once too, due to illness maybe last year. But can you maybe talk about that?
Yeah, so we did that actually twice in season 2 because Randy had his little heart scare. So one time it was just me and Eve, and then in the finals, Eve got sick, like really sick, and it was just me and Randy. So the 2-man booth, I don't think anything is better, but a 2-man is different. Certainly, you have a lot more time to talk, and that's not always a good thing. Silence in fights is probably something that I need to grow more comfortable with. Just let the fight play out, let the action speak for itself, because I really admire when people do that in other sports. So I need to get better at that when I'm calling fights. I really do like the 3-man booth because there's so much happening in a fight, and there are so many complicated nuances. Even though I'm a pretty experienced fighter and I've been training under a great mind like Jeremy Horn for a super long time, like, there's a lot of stuff that I just still, in martial arts, don't really know or can't articulate the way that Eve was able to, or that Randy is able to, or that Ken Flo will be able to. Very much looking forward to working for him. And I always like to kind of bat it back and forth where, this is what Randy has to say about something, and then, well, what do you think, Ken Flo? Because, they're differing perspectives at times. Not every coach agrees on how to corner a fighter. Not every fighter agrees on how to approach a strategic situation. And the same is true, especially when you have guys that are so experienced in the game when they're providing analysis, when they're talking about what's happening. Not everyone would go with the same game plan. Going back to season 1, Boss Rutan is very black and white about what he thinks guys should be doing. And he'll tell you that on a broadcast. Randy is not so much like that, and we'll see how Ken Flo is. So the 3-man booth is great because it allows for a multitude of perspectives and insight that you might not get from a 2-man crew.
When you guys have your pre-fight meetings, do a lot of the young fighters even realize that you fought? And have you ever been able to mentor them as well? Because going back to your career, I really appreciated your weigh-in, for example. I feel like a lot of fighters get lost in the shuffle. They think it's just about the fight, which, look, that's 90 to 95% of it. But I still think that with the way the sport is growing and all these different promotions, you can get lost in the shuffle if you don't make your stamp when you have the opportunity. Have you ever been able to share that with fighters or nudge them that way, especially the ones that have so much talent, but we just forget who they fought last because they don't help us remember it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, you kind of went through the list of guys that I've been able to work with, right? So when we're doing pre-fight meetings, if you're a young fighter or even an experienced fighter and you walk into that room, Sean O'Connell is not the guy that you're going to ask for advice from, right? If it's Randy Couture or Eve Edwards or Boss Rutan or Kenny Florian or Sean O'Connell, I'm the guy that they're just passing over. And I'm fine with that. I'm comfortable with that because my role as a broadcaster now is to be the John Anik, is to be the Mauro Ranallo. It's not to be the big time celebrity famous fighter. So that's just the role I have now. And look, I don't have the credentials that those guys have. So if I put myself in the shoes of someone who's coming into the PFL as an organization and I walk into a room and it's Randy Couture and Kenny Florian and me, I'm the last one that I'm going to ask a question to. So, I think me and Ray Cooper III, we have a good relationship because, he liked my fighting style and he showed appreciation for that very early when we were both on the roster. And we've talked a lot about some things. And, I've just to provide an example, I've told Ray, look, man, skill-wise, you are everything a fighter needs to be. You're tough. You've got well-rounded skills. You've got a great backstory because you're so family-centric. There's a lot of things about you that people will really love. And I try and encourage him, just come out of your shell a little bit, right? Just be a little bit more of a talker. Be a little bit more of a showman. But that's not his personality. So, and he's made that clear. We're just yeah, man, that's not me. I'm here to fight. I'm here to win. and I'm here to take care of my family. And that's like, it just is what it is. So, when I offer advice, oftentimes it's unsolicited and it doesn't have to be listened to. I wish more people would have fun with it like I tried to, but it's a serious game. So not a lot of people can separate how serious it is and have some fun.
Do you subscribe to putting people over because of your chair, and you're kind of the director, like you said, you're a point guard, you distribute to Kenflo, you distribute to Randy, and then you got to hit your reads, but you have the ability to put not only a fighter, a coach, a team over, because if they're doing something well, you're going to want to do that. But do you think fighters are aware of that? And are you aware of it? And do you try and practice it? I feel like it's something that I've seen in our sport that helped a lot of coaches and a lot of teams early on.
Yeah, I'm still pretty new in the game, so I'm trying to find to accentuate those finer points and to get good at stuff like that. And I think that I do a decent job of, if I know the answer to a question, I still will ask the question instead of saying it and offering the insight myself, because I'm not the analyst, right? So I'll say, Randy, what should he be doing here? Even though I know very well he should be hunting for an underhook, he should be improving head position and things like that. Or if I hear advice from a corner that I know should be coming, I try and point that out, and I try and accentuate, the good things about the fighters and my fellow broadcast team and things like that, because we're all trying to be the best in the business. All due respect to John Anik and Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier and Dominic Cruz and everyone who has kind of set the standard for combat sports. I want to be better than them. I want our crew to be the one that people are like, man, I wish we could hear them calling this huge fight between Francis Ngannou and John Jones. I wish I could hear Sean O'Connell on the play-by-play, and I wish I could hear Randy Couture on the analysis work. Like, I want people to consider us the gold standard, and we got some catching up to do. I fully acknowledge that, but I'm trying to get good at every part of the game that I can in order to make that happen.
Tremendous comment.
Yeah. All these questions about you helping other people is just to disguise the fact that we're going to try and help you right now.
Okay.
Ready? All right.
Yeah.
You got Mamma Mia. You got Good Night Irene. It is all over. You're the real OC. What if when a fight ends, you say, it just got real? Huh?
Hey.
That's not bad.
It isn't bad.
And you know what? That would actually probably fit like as a branding thing for PFL, because Lillian Garcia, who is our in-arena announcer, right? Lillian, her trademark phrase is, it's about to get real. So I could be coming full circle on all of that. And then, I'd have to check with her and make sure it's okay. But see, that's what I'm talking about. I don't have one of those catchphrases, and I need to come up with one. And that's probably the leader in the clubhouse right now.
There you go. All right, let's get back to some PFL. You got a lot of big free agent signings this year. And every time at the start of the season, we always put that big target on the guy that won the year before, the gal that won the year before. But with these big free agent signings, do they almost have a bigger target this year than some of the people that won last year?
Yeah, they do. And that's one of the interesting things about those signings, right? So Natan Schultz at 155 pounds has shown unbelievable resilience. He has shown a completely well-rounded skill set. He's won back-to-back titles, $2 million tournaments, and everyone's talking about Anthony Pettis. That's crazy, because Natan Schultz is a back-to-back champion. So the same thing at 170 pounds. We have our season 1 champ, Magomed Karamov, our season 2 champ, Ray Cooper III. Those two guys fought each other in the season 1 championship, right? So just like sustained excellence from those individuals at 170 pounds, but everyone's talking about the debut for Rory MacDonald. So it's really fascinating, because our champions, even dominant champions, are being overlooked because of the name value of other guys. And that, to me, provides a really interesting dynamic for our storytelling, obviously. But when we see eventually matchups between Natan Schultz and Anthony Pettis, how mad is Natan Schultz that the other guy's getting all the attention? or if we see Ray Cooper or Magomed Karamov fight against Rory MacDonald, are we going to see, like, this is a guy in Rory MacDonald who's been at the top of the heap at 170 for a decade? Or are we seeing what I think might happen, one of these other two kind of taking their place at the top of the mountain and getting more attention because they finally beat a name that everybody in the mixed martial arts world recognizes as being a top guy, which, by the way, most of them already have beat someone like that. I mean, Ray Cooper beat Jake Shields twice, but it's still people talking about Rory MacDonald. And I know Ray's not too happy about that. So I love that the free agent signings are bringing so much attention to what we're doing in PFL Season 3. But the crazy thing about it is I don't know that I'm confident any of those three big free agents are like shoe-ins for a championship appearance.
Sean, we spoke to Miesha Tate about an hour and a half ago on our show, and she apologized to us because she said at some point, I know you guys probably asked me, hey, you going to come out of retirement? And she said, I lied to you. So I want to ask you right now, and I want to see what kind of poker face you got. Would you ever do it? There's a check sitting right behind you. Could there be a second check at some point? Would you come out of retirement?
Well, first of all, I love Miesha Tate. I had an opportunity to do a radio show with her for about a year. Love her. Super happy that we're going to see her competing again. So congratulations to Miesha for doing what's best for her and coming out of retirement. And to answer your question is, if the number on my check looks like the one behind me, where is it? If it's $1 million or if it's something close to that or more than that, then yeah, I'm coming out of retirement. It's a business proposition for all of us. But unless someone's coming with some hefty dollars, I am definitely going to be staying retired and focusing on being the best broadcaster in the game because that number would have to be real big for my wife to feel like it was justified.
You definitely put your family through a lot in Long Beach because I was there, and that was something else, man. But for those that don't know, that's 2 fights in one night, and OC wasn't doing too well in one of them, I believe.
Yeah, I lost the first round.
Yeah,
and I had to win. Yeah, it was. But that's my career, right? I mean, like, I look at all these people who do it and they make it look easy. And I'm jealous because it just was never that way for me. And that's why I retired when I did, because I took a lot more damage than a lot of some of these dudes that are even older than me.
Yeah, you rose to the occasion and won. I'm hearing this year that format won't be available to us because of COVID restrictions. But do you think they'll bring it back next year, or do you think they're going to explore it and see and maybe just keep it to quarterfinals, semifinals, finals?
Yeah, I really hope that we can get back to the 2 fights in one night situation post-COVID once we get all this worked out. I really, really do hope so because it's a thing that separates Professional Fighters League from everyone else. And it's a thing that it's hard. I mean, it's something that kind of links the newest thing in the game, PFL, to the old school where, a lot of these originals, guys like Randy, who I get to do the broadcast with, guys like my coach, Jeremy Horn, they had to do that. Coming up through the sport, they had to do that. Multiple fights in one night. And a lot of times it was winner take all. So either won multiple fights in a night or you didn't get paid back then. Now, PFL doesn't do it like that. We pay people even if they exit early. But I hope we get back to that. That's a decision made above my pay grade. But who doesn't want to see Rory MacDonald fighting twice in one night? Who doesn't want to see Fabricio Werdum fighting twice in one night? Anthony Pettis fighting twice in one night. Natan Schultz, Lance Palmer, Kayla Harrison fighting twice in one night. I want to see that. I hope we get back to it.
So do I. It's pretty special, honestly. And so many things can happen, almost like the March Madness, where sometimes somebody can't continue and somebody else, comes to fill in. It's you show up to the arena expecting the unexpected. So it's a nice twist, and it does make you guys pretty unique.
Yeah, and that's something that I think that, the brass, I think the executives in PFL might not recognize as a good thing all the time, right? Because it's like, well, what happens if, like what we had in season 2, what happens if Magomed Karamov fights in his quarterfinal bout and goes back, and then the doctor won't clear him to continue for his semifinal bout? a guy who earned his way through doesn't get to continue. Well, what happened is his opponent had to come back. The guy who lost, it's a lucky loser rule, we called it. He had to come back. He had to fight to try and continue unexpectedly. So he's got to get himself dialed in mentally. He threw his mouthpiece away. He had to go back and find his mouthpiece because he thought his night was over. He thought his career was over. And instead, he's fighting again in an hour. So all of these things that it's probably the ideal situation is everyone stays healthy and fights all the way through. But the little nuances and the little twists like you're talking about, they're so unexpected, and it's high drama. And if we do a good job of telling that story on the broadcast and covering that, it's totally unique, and it's something that you can't find anywhere else in the MMA world.
Completely agreed. Just the preparation alone of who you may or may not be fighting is also, another intangible. All right, so you guys start off on 4/23, April 23rd, PFL 2021, week 1 with the lightweights and featherweights. We've already talked about Anthony Pettis. He's in the main event there against Clay Collard. You'll start things off on ESPN Plus, and then you move over to the Deuce, ESPN2. Marcin Hell versus Natan Schulte. Schulte's not going to like that one. He's the co-main event.
Yeah.
At least the way we have it listed. Perhaps you know something different. Bubba Jenkins versus Lance Palmer. That's a good one. 2 stud wrestlers who are been competing for a decade now in MMA. But can you tell us? I listed that as a Friday event, but then you guys settle back to Thursday nights.
So it's going to go. We're going to have some Thursdays and a couple of Fridays events. That's all ESPN fitting into their broadcast schedule where it optimizes viewership for PFL. So on the nights that we're on a Friday is because there's something else happening on a Thursday that they decided was competing with us or something like that. So most of the events will be on Thursdays, but there are a couple of Fridays, like that first one we start off on a Friday. So we're trying to settle into that Thursday time slot, right? But it's like most NFL games are on Sunday, but you got Thursday night football, Monday night football. You got to be ready for whatever.
I suppose, yeah, that's some competition in the fall, but I kind of was liking seeing Thursday for PFL. I just feel like it's a night that you can own for combat sports fans.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make sure how that was going to work out. But the first one's on Friday with Pettis and Collard, Schulte, all the ones I just mentioned. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. What do you think would have been the best thing these athletes could have done? Maybe not Pettis or some of the free agents, but some of the ones that kind of sat around for about 18 months. Rest and recuperate, continue to hit it hard. Like, what do you think seems to be the best recipe as you've probably studied some of these guys on social media and what they were up to?
Well, yeah, I think that the best thing for a fighter, and this is something I could have done a better job with in my career, right, is even when you don't have something on the docket, even when you don't have a fight on a specific date that you're preparing for, just making sure that you're in the gym working on technique, not necessarily working on conditioning, not necessarily competing and sparring hard and doing all that kind of stuff, but just making sure that all the tools in the toolbox are sharp and adding a couple tools in the toolbox over the course of, now a year and a half, right? And initially people expected, I got 4 or 5 months before my next fight. Now it's going to be 9 months. Now it's going to be a year. Well, now there's not really an excuse for you to not have the necessary skills because you had all this time off that you knew PFL was coming back and they paid you a stipend. So you knew eventually there was light at the end of the tunnel and you were expected to compete again. And you knew if you're in the lightweight class that you got to get to a point where Natan Schulte can't take you down at will, right? He can't judo throw you and control you. Or if you're a featherweight, you got to get to a point where you got to be able to stuff a Lance Palmer takedown. And I don't know if a year or a year and a half is enough time to make those things happen for most fighters, but you know kind of what the gold standard is in your weight class. So that's what you should be working towards. And I hope that most guys did that, and gals, because obviously Kayla Harrison is a different animal at 155 pounds for the women. So everyone else is trying to close the gap between themselves and her.
Sean, hopefully if your schedule allows it, we can maybe do something every week, throughout the season where we can preview the top fights, remind everybody of the start times and all that, because this is going to be a big season, man. With MacDonald and Pettis and Justin Willis and Werdum, and then the stars you've already created, and I'm seeing a consistent presence now on ESPN2. This could be that blowout season for PFL.
I mean, ideally, that's what it will be. And if we can do that, and I can come on with you guys every week, or every week that we have fights, I will make time for it. I will step out of the fighter meetings to make time to do this, because it's absolutely a crucial year for the PFL, and I'm biased because of my great experience in the PFL, but I think we have a really great thing going on. I think when you talk to some of those big free agent fighters who decided to come over, they'll tell you the same thing, that it's a fighter-centric organization. It's awesome that there's an alternative where you can be competing at a very high level on a consistent schedule with $1 million prize at the end of the tunnel every single year. It's not this thing where you got to work your way up, win 7 fights in a row, and hope that the powers that be think that you're worthy of a title shot. It's a meritocracy here. It's a season like any other professional sports league. Yeah, you can have a misstep like I did in season 1, like Ray Cooper did in season 2, where maybe one of your regular season fights doesn't go your way, but you still get to win a championship. Just like is the case in the NFL, in the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, Major League Soccer. All of those leagues have this thing where it's like, you want to be great, but you don't have to be perfect in order to have an opportunity for a title shot.
I just thought of something. Has anybody been the 72 Dolphins in your league where they won it all? Because I'm not sure, but do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, Lance Palmer is yet to lose a fight. And Natan Schultz is yet to lose a fight. He did have a draw. And then last season, Emiliano Sordi not only won all of his fights at 205 pounds, but he finished every fight, and the longest one was like 7 minutes. It was just early in the second round. So that's been our most dominant season so far. Emiliano Sordi at 205 pounds. Because of my conspicuous absence, I like to say, he dominated, right? And it was that was one thing that when I joke around with our president Ray Sefo, I'm just like, man, who are you going to get to beat Emiliano Sordi? Because he looks like a top 5 light heavyweight in the world to me right now. He got his mental game worked out. He always had the physical skill, and he got it figured out mentally to where you can't touch him. And he's got unbelievable power in both hands. He's got a complete grappling game. I don't know if we brought anyone in who's capable of beating him. I'm excited to see it.
I love it. And I love talking about, these finer points that when fans hear, it's going to get them excited to tune in. Sorry, wow, 7 minutes. So I'm glad we were able to do that. And you really know your stuff, man. So, again, let's try and connect weekly throughout this year so that we can do this type of promotion and get pumped up. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, you're one of our favorites because we can talk all the sports with you. Enjoy March Madness tonight. Go Pac-12 tomorrow, and we'll talk to you the week of the 23rd.
All right. Thanks, fellas.